I'd like to welcome you all to another edition of Meet Your Merrimack Town Candidates. Every few days we've been doing a show highlighting one of the candidates for town council or school board. And today I'm very happy to be joined by Nancy Harrington. Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
For those of you that haven't seen any of the earlier shows, just a little quick background. What we do here is we're not interested in the political issues, political philosophy, or anything else. We're here to get to know the person. During the next few weeks, there'll be plenty of articles about where the candidates stand on issues, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of other cable access shows that will focus on it. But today, we're just looking to get to know them a little bit better. So with that being said, let's come right out of the gate and ask where you grew up.
I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm the youngest of 4 children. Grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment, which when you think about it now, where did my parents go to get away from us, and they couldn't. But it was in a middle-class neighborhood, and everybody else. It was a very busy family Irish neighborhood. So you learn to live in close spaces.
Now, did you live in Cambridge your whole upbringing?
Lived in Cambridge until I moved to New Hampshire, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, now how did you spend your summers out there in the city, per se?
In the city. Well, you grew up in Lowell. I'm sure it's not that far off. As I mentioned, it was a family neighborhood. So every house had multiple kids. So in those days, you didn't stay in the house and watch TV. It was expected you get out of the house.
Yeah, right.
You always did, and you had to be in before the streetlights. That was the only rule. So we would end up having very spontaneous games, whether it be jump rope or roller skating, those kind of things.
Or
when
giant
you were younger.
step, or red light.
Red light, and invariably someone would go home crying.
Yeah.
Because you'd fight, and then you'd get back together the next day. So there was a lot of spontaneous just games that you would.
Yeah, I remember that. You tell kids now, you say giant step, red light, or relieve ball, and it was amazing what you could do without a computer back then.
Right.
We didn't know.
And you didn't play inside the house. Kid, you didn't go visit your friends' houses. You went and called them Oli Oli entry.
Yeah.
And then they'd come out. But no family allowed kids in the house. You were expected to go out and play.
Yeah, I love touching base on that, boy. Talk about, you're the first city person I've had on the show, so you're bringing back some immediate memories. But that is it. You would go outside this stoop, and you would call their name.
That's right.
That was it.
That's right.
No knocking on the door.
No.
And they'd either come out, or their parent would say, Johnny can't come out today.
That's right.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly
and then you would
right.
go out, and like you said, you do your thing.
And I lived near a park, so they would have some summer things during the summer. And there was tennis courts that used to flood, so you'd have ice skating during the winter. So there really was. I mean, there was a pretty good amount of activity just from the neighborhood with the kids getting together.
Now, did you ever go to Revere Beach or Nantasket?
When I got to be in high school, we would get together and we would go to Revere or Lynn, Nantasket. We would go to, we had a routine for a good 2 years. We would go to Mass first thing on Sunday morning, go home, get the bathing suits, and we would take off and go to Nantasket.
Yeah, that's something you don't remember. They had the playground. What do you call it? The amusement park there.
Yes.
And
further down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Geez, those were the
Those
days.
are the carefree times.
Yeah. So, wonder if we could talk a little bit about your parents and what values during that time they helped instill in you that's made you the person you are today.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny, when you were asking for the pictures, we had scanned a lot of my parents' pictures. They're both passed away now. And as I was going through, a lot of the memories came back. My father came from a family of 14 kids. My mother came from a family of 8. They were both Irish, but they were very different. My father's family...
Can I jump in real quick before I forget? How many first cousins did you have?
Over 100 first cousins.
Oh, my goodness.
Over 100. Because we had the 4 kids, but we were the smallest of the aunts and uncles that have children.
Yeah.
They all had like 7, 5, whatever. So my father's family was the rambunctious Irish. when they would get together, there was so much noise and so many kids yelling. It was just activity.
Yeah.
My mother's family was the lace curtain, Irish, and you can see in the pictures, my father's side of the family picture, it was all activity. My mother's side of the family were all sitting there sedately.
Really, huh?
Oh, yeah. We were always dressed, and I remember at the dining room table, children were seen and not heard. So you sat there and you were quiet. So it was really a dichotomy, the two sides of the family, but clearly Irish. And so a lot of the customs and the philosophy comes from that as well. But they both worked. My mother worked, as far as I recall. Apparently when I was younger, there was a time she didn't, but as far as I remember, she was always a working mother, which was unusual in those days.
Right.
My mother was the only one who did work of my friends. And as a result, I think I became more independent as a result. And they were very different people. My father was a very funny, very mellow, very patient man. My mother was the strong one. She was the matriarch.
Yeah.
And so really the combination of the two, I think I do portray similarities in both. There have been times in my life that I've thanked my dad for his patience, because I've had to be patient with things. And other times I've thanked my mother, because I've had to be strong too.
Now, who was the disciplinarian in
My
the
mother.
house? Oh, really?
Absolutely.
I had a feeling you were going to say
Absolutely. Absolutely.
that. Oh, let's go a little into school.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of student were you? Again, I'm talking more the middle school and high school. What kind of student? What'd you like? And
I think I was a A-, B+ student. It was certainly good enough to get into Boston College, which was really what the important thing is. In high school, again, it was Cambridge. I had gone to a parochial grammar school, and I remember my mother wanting me to go to parochial high school, which is the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to get to the old world, you know.
yeah.
And so when I went to Cambridge High and Latin, now they've combined Ringe Tech and Cambridge Latin, so it's one school.
Right.
But at the time, and Merrimack is a very diverse city. It was even then. But I grew up in this little neighborhood.
Right.
And it really did stay pretty much in the neighborhood. But it was good for me. It
And when
really
you said
opened up the
Merrimack, you
world.
meant Cambridge.
I'm sorry, Cambridge, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably a certain amount of truth in that.
A Freudian slip.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Merrimack's diverse too in its
Yeah.
own way.
Well, it's getting more so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But so in high school, my horizons really broadened. And I got involved in a lot of things at school. I used to work at the library. And I did work from my junior year to senior year in high school. I used to work at the Fogg Art Museum, which was near Harvard.
Yep.
So I worked from that point on, and I became really independent. I used to buy my own clothes, which of course was my mother thought was wonderful, because to her it demonstrated.
Right. Well,
certain
again, as you
independence.
said, right, she was a
And
working
so that
person.
really was fostered as well. So after high school, I went to Boston College.
Okay. Well, you're kind of jumping ahead of me here.
Okay, well, let me back up then. Go right
Well,
ahead.
you've made my job simple. Geez, they had said a trained chimp could do my job. Now I'm beginning to think we don't
I
even
don't
need
think
we don't
so.
even need
I
a
don't
trained
think
chimp.
so.
You just come in here and do your thing. But you've touched base on what I was going to say is, what you did. The next question was your activities in high school, what you did, and I know sports wasn't your thing necessarily.
Well, I was a basketball player in high school.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I wonder why.
You're sandbagging
They
me
saw
then.
how tall I was, and they went, "We want you for basketball." Of course, in those days, Title IX wasn't around, so girls' sports was not a big thing.
Right.
But that was the days it was 6-on-6. I was a guard, and you couldn't go half court.
So you played high school basketball?
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh.
In fact, I played basketball in college for a year.
Oh my goodness.
But again, it was before Title IX. But it really got to be boring because you couldn't cross the half court.
Yeah.
As a guard, you had, you got the ball and you got it great.
I'm saying
and
I
then
know,
you had
but
to give it off to the four. You couldn't go half over court.
Really?
It was 6-on-6.
Oh wow.
So it was boring because you had to stay on one side.
Yeah. And overall, if you had to say your fondest memory growing up, if you take your whole 18 years and put it in a thing, what would you say your fondest, as you look back and smile, what would it be?
I would probably think about the times when my father's family, my father's parents, my grandparents, had a place down at Quincy Beach. And all of the aunts and uncles and all of the cousins would get together.
I don't know, we're talking a cousin count of 100.
Yes. I mean, they were, But the rule was you weren't allowed inside the house unless you had to go to the bathroom. So all the aunts and uncles would be inside the house having their party, get it together.
Right, right.
And they had the screen door, and they'd give you the sandwich through the school door. I mean, through the door, the screen door. And I remember my older cousins, they had horseshoe crabs down there. And they used to swing them and tease the younger cousins with horseshoe crabs.
Yeah.
So just those kind of memories that I remember. And I was pretty young then, but clearly it made an impression on me.
Yeah.
And it was a very bonding time for the family.
Isn't it funny, though, just going, I mean, what a different time we live in now. Nowadays, it'd be the families, the kids are inside, and the parents would stay out so they wouldn't get in their way.
Absolutely. Yeah, you stay out, stay out.
Yeah. Now, you touched base on, we were talking about your grades, where you said it was good enough to get into Boston College, and that was the goal. And we've never talked about this, but I have to ask, how old were you? Was Boston College a school you wanted to get in?
Yes, yes. I don't remember not wanting to be a nurse. And my mother always wanted her children to go to college. So really it was instilled in us, younger, I want you to go to college. So really it just sort of added together. When I got to high school, what college could I go to for nursing? Because there were nurses in my family as well.
Yeah.
But not college nurses. But those two, philosophies came together. And so, yeah, I knew pretty soon I wanted to go to BC.
Okay, and when you went there, were you a commuter? Did you live there?
I commuted for 3 years to BC. And the senior year, I did get an apartment. I rented an apartment with friends.
Yeah.
It was right near Cleveland Circle.
Do you have any anecdotes about your college life?
Not that I'd want to admit to. Well, a lot of the nursing curriculum at BC was very strenuous. So really, there really was a lot of studying you had to do.
Yeah.
So, a lot of it was just, there was clinical time. We went to a lot of the hospitals in Boston.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
What is the word that Northeast has?
Co-op?
Yeah. In other words, was it during your 4 years? Were the times you were actually working in hospitals?
Yep. Freshman year was pretty much all academics, but then for sophomore, junior, and senior year, you spent probably half your time going to various clinical facilities. I was at Boston City, Mass General. We did pediatrics, med-surg, psychiatry. So the 3 years you spent a lot of times off campus because you were actually doing your clinicals in the hospital.
And like I said, I have a pretty set format here where I go questions, but I'm going to delve off it a little. There's no curveballs.
I understand.
But I happen to, again, I know you, your husband's a friend of mine, so I know a little bit more about you than some of the other guests. And I guess what I'd like to know is how you went, in other words, a little bit about your nursing background and then how you got into academics.
Okay, that's a fair question. It's sort of a circuitous route. I've often said, kids will say, I don't know what I want to do. And I said, even if you do, you're not going to end up there. Because as we all know, as we make decisions in our life at different times, we end up taking different roads. So at this point, what I think I'd be where I am now, absolutely not. Right. I started, when I graduated from college, I worked as a nurse at Cambridge City Hospital. Then I worked at the VA hospital in Bedford, which is why I moved up to Merrimack, because it was so close to New Hampshire. I really wanted to be able to get out of the city. I had enough city. Yeah. So then I took off a couple of years to raise some kids. And then I went back to working at a CMC. They had a school of nursing there. I said,
so you're in Manchester now?
I was in Manchester working.
Yeah.
And then I ended up working at St. Joe's in Nashua on the med-surg floors.
Okay, and can you give me a timeline? Are we in the 80s now?
We're in the 80s. When I was at St. Joe's, it was about 80, 81.
Okay.
And they had a school of nursing there too, so worked there. And at that time, I started to go to grad school. So I was working there, going to grad school. At that time,
and where did you go to grad school?
I went to grad school, University of Massachusetts Lowell. Okay. At that point, I was a single parent. I had 2 young kids. So I said, well, I got to get my life in track a little bit more.
Yeah.
Ended up going to grad school part-time. And then ended up hearing about, after I finished grad school, there was a position at Greater Lowell Technical High School. They had a practical nurse program, and they needed a director. So I had had experience in a nursing program. I had worked for Riv as well.
And again, we're still in the 80s?
College. We're in the 80s at that point.
Yeah.
I think it was 89, I ended up going to Greater Lowell. So as what happens in a lot of jobs, I started with that. The nursing program really grew. They said, gee, you're doing such a good job, we're going to have you do this. Made me an adult post-secondary director, which meant I was in charge of all the continuing education, the plumbers, the electricians.
Oh, really?
Absolutely, really.
Oh, oh God. So it wasn't just nursing, it was the whole
absolutely.
9 years.
So I had that. Then they gave me that. And I'll tell you, knowing the education of plumbers and electricians, what they have to do to get licensure,
yeah.
I have much more respect. People have no idea the hours that they have to do to get journeyman and master. So then...
So you were in charge of the night school program?
I was in charge of all the night school as well.
Of the trade part of it. Is
That's
that
correct.
a correct statement?
That's correct.
Okay.
So then they said, gee, Nancy, we would like you to take 2 divisions of the high school. They had a medical assistant and a health assistant division. Okay, so I had that, and at that point, I became much more familiar with the high school, because it's a technical high school, but I was always involved in the adults, whether it be the nursing program or the adult education programs.
Okay, yeah.
And one of the things I made clear is, I don't know what I'm going to do with high school kids. I've never dealt with them. So it was a deal. We do it for a year, and if there was an issue, if I didn't feel I was doing a decent job, I could bow out. Well, as it turned out, I loved the high school kids. I really did. So I did.
Now, how many kids were in the program under you?
In terms of the high school?
Yeah, in terms of the high school now. Just trying to get a feel.
Probably about 120.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I also got involved with the high school in general. There were a lot of connections that I ended up making, because you had to deal with the academic teachers, you had to deal. And it's interesting, because nursing is really both. It's a trade, but it's also academic.
Oh, absolutely.
So I was able to transfer some of that past experience unknowingly. I did know more than I thought.
Now, at that point, are you out of the hospitals?
I'm not directly doing any clinical supervision. I'm managing, I'm the director of it.
Okay, right. But, and I guess as part of the curriculum, would it be like, did you have working relationships with other hospitals in the area?
Yes, I'd have to negotiate some contracts, absolutely, with the
So
Saints
like
Memorial, St. Joe's, it used
yeah,
to be,
right.
Lowell General, absolutely. A lot of long-term care.
So in other words, the kids were getting in there and doing one way
absolutely.
or another. And so you weren't out of hospitals. I mean, you
No,
were,
I still have the contact. That's right. That's right. And I used to hope that if my instructors were sick, I would head sub for them. And I actually enjoyed it.
Oh,
you know, because you sort of get back to your roots. I still enjoyed that. So that's when a lot of the people within the high school became familiar with the wing, because they really didn't have contact with me because I was sort of separated.
Right.
Now that I was involved with the high school, I got a lot more involved in administration of the high school. And then 2 years ago, I got promoted to director of curriculum for the school.
Now, when you say the school, what does that
mean?
mean?
The entire high school.
Oh, you're kidding me.
I'm not kidding.
Boy, what a sandbagger you are.
So,
I had no idea. I mean, I knew you had a wonderful job. I thought it was you were in charge of the nursing school.
Right. No,
I had no idea you were dealing with
So would
the
I think I
curriculum.
would be here now? No. But it's sort of tracked, and it's just sort of
And when you
happened.
deal with the curriculum, it's not, again, not just the trades, is it the
It's
whole...
academic as well.
Unbelievable.
They do have a director of technical studies, which pretty much focuses on the shops, but I work very closely with him. So
Right.
between the two of us, we take care of
You
them.
deal with the curriculum, so you must
Absolutely.
deal with the Greater Volk school board and that type of thing,
Oh
too.
yeah, the school committee, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Gosh, gee,
So who would have thought I'd end up there?
I'm
But that's how it
amazed
ended
that
up.
I had no idea that you were in charge of the trade plumbing thing at one point,
Yeah.
and then curriculum again. I just thought you were in charge of the nursing school, which seemed like
Which
a
I was
pretty
at one
important
point,
gig.
Which is one point, that's right.
Oh, wow. Well, now we've covered your schooling, and we've kind of got what you do for a living, which is very diverse, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
And now let's get a little into your personal life, per se. And as I think I touched base on it, I'm going to mention your spouse because it's someone that a lot of people watch and know. He's very involved in the town also, and that's Phil Straight. And I was wondering if you could tell me two things. A, what it was about you that you thought it was potential. And B, how'd you know he was the one?
Okay. Well, we had known each other over a period of, I want to say, 6 or 7 years. And one of the things that I noticed consistently about him was he was a very kind man, very kind. And he was very patient. And so that's one of the, and he had a very good sense of humor. So that's sort of, okay, that's good. One particular incident that for me said, this is it. We were visiting his mother. And he was sitting on the couch holding her hand. And I said, what man does that? Not just unashamedly. And you could tell it wasn't put on. It was the kind of respect he had for his mother.
Yep.
And I said, okay, that's the kind of man.
Yeah.
That, to me, if you treat your mother good, you're going to treat your wife good.
A lot of people believe that very strongly.
So to me, that was a pivotal thing for me.
Okay, and you touched bases when you were raising your kids as a single mother at the beginning. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your kids, and then now I know you're in the grandparent business.
Yes, I am. We all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a son, PJ, and a daughter, Michelle. Both grew up in the school system in Merrimack. Both married Merrimack people. My son still lives in the town, and he has a 6-year-old son named Braden. And my daughter, Michelle, is living in Westerly, Rhode Island. Yeah. And in fact, I'm sorry, I have a cold, which I think my grandson shared with me this weekend. And he is 2 years old. So both boys.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it is. To be a grandparent's great, because you can spoil them and say, okay, I don't have to deal with the repercussions of this.
Yeah.
It's true. It's a great place to be.
Now, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you've been involved in the Merrimack community over the years.
Okay.
And before that, I'd like to touch bases. As far as you got to Merrimack because you ended up working at the Bedford VA, and Merrimack seemed like a nice community there.
When I moved into Merrimack in 1972, it was 7,000 people.
Really?
Really.
So you're one of them, too.
I feel like I'm a native, which of course I'm not, but yeah, I've been there a long time.
You've been here 40 years.
40 years.
Wow, I think, we had a guest on the show yesterday, Davis Powell. I was joking, I said, if you're here less than 20 years, they think the moving van's still in the, and Davis, I think you're being kind. I think it's more than 20 years. I think 40 years. You can't argue with that, lady.
No, it's true.
Wow.
And so as my kids grew up in the town, again, I'm working at the time.
Yeah. And
I was going to grad school at the time. But I was involved a lot with the MYA because my kids were involved in a lot of the sports. My daughter was very active in the soccer program, continued with that through high school. And my son was involved in a lot of different things in the town, whether it be baseball, soccer, those kind of things. So most of my activity in those times were pretty much MYA related. However, I was always kept myself informed what was happening in the town.
Yeah.
It always intrigued me. I always used to watch. Of course, you didn't have the cable then, but I would try to keep track of what was going on and controversies that would happen with the school, and became informed more by parents more than anything else. And then as time went on, as my kids got older, and as my life became a little bit more stable, I really got much more involved with the town. Of course, in 2006 is when there was a position opening in the selectmen, the last selectman.
Right.
And you were there at the time, and I was appointed to that vacant position. And then after that, I was elected to the first town council for the next 3 years. So there was a total of 4. At that time was when this new position was coming up. And I knew I couldn't devote the attention you need to devote to the town or to the job. So at that point, I'm going, okay, timing is everything. Why don't I concentrate on that?
And again, I mean, you had done like 4+ years. In other words, you did you finished off a term.
That's correct.
And then did a full term.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah,
so,
4 years is plenty.
So that's why, I took a breather in between 2 years. I think I'm fairly stable in my job now. There's a learning curve that always happens.
Yeah.
And I think I've certainly not done learning. I would never assume that. but I feel like I have a handle on things now.
Right. When you're not running the school, and you're back, working with helping the community. What do you do for Nancy for hobbies?
I have no time. No. Okay. Actually, I've never really been a hobby person. I like to putz. If any hobby I have, it's gardening. I like flowers, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I putz around the house. I love to paint. I don't
Really?
mean artistic paint. I'm talking about painting houses.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And also, we mentioned you're in the grandparent business, and when one of them is in
time.
Westerly, Rhode Island,
That's
that takes a
absolutely
lot
right.
of time.
And that is part. You do change your focus a bit. You're absolutely right.
Yep. A typical Saturday for Nancy Harrington.
Well, I sleep as late as I can, but as you get older, you don't need it as much. You keep on waking up. Those days that you would want to have slept, no. Now you can. You don't need it.
Yeah.
Again, I'm a putzer, pretty much. I'll do those during the week.
See, we have a lot in common. I've been called something similar to that.
A putz?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, you got me off track.
No, we're talking about a Saturday. You wake up, you wake up at the
I
crack
putz
of
around
noon.
the house. Yeah, I putz around the house. That's the time when I can try to make up on, because during the week I'm busy as well.
Yeah.
And you come home and you just want to relax. Where on the weekends, that's when I end up doing the shopping or whatever it is I do. And in the summer, I do spend more time outside. Yeah. And the grandkids.
Oh, and again, they're at the ages. My grandkids are similar to yours age, and they're reaching at 6 years old. It's just fantastic.
Oh, absolutely.
We went
What
and
a
saw the Harlem
transition.
Globetrotters last
I
weekend.
saw some pictures on your
And
Facebook.
he was at the perfect age. 1 or 2 years early, it might have been tough, but boy, once they get older, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And they become characters.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Their personalities really do come.
Absolutely.
Little person.
Well, that's our first section where we try and get to know you a little. And gosh, I've known you for 8 or 10 years, and I had no idea. I certainly had no idea you were in charge of curriculum over there. But now I'd like to do something we call the lightning round. And basically the goal is, again, try and get a little feel for you, your tastes, what makes you tick, and ask quick questions and looking for quick answers. There might be one answer, we might go to the next one, and then there might be one that's interesting and we'll touch base. But let's start off with your first car.
My first car was a 49 Pontiac.
Really?
Really. That was sold to me by my brother who was going to Vietnam. I was a freshman at BC, and he sold it to me for $1. And the steering wheel was like this big. The windows were like this big. I think it only lasted for a year. But I had been commuting on the train to BC.
Yeah.
So I didn't care what kind of car. To be able to not to have to get on the T and then get the trolley all the way
And
up
were you
there.
able to park in those days?
Oh, yeah. In Timbuktu. The parking lot was further down near the stadium is now.
Yeah.
And you'd have to walk up to the campus.
Okay, and what do you drive today?
I have a 2008 Ford Escape.
And how do you, oh, really? Yeah. So you got rid of the Altima?
Oh, yeah.
How do you like that?
Oh, I love it.
Oh, really?
Love it.
Favorite TV show growing up?
For some reason, The Rifleman. I don't know why. You're going to ask me why, because Phil said the same thing. Why? And also,
I like Chuck Connors.
I know what. Probably because he was pretty handsome. I don't know why.
It was a good show.
For some reason, it struck me. And then, of course, Laughing.
Yeah.
The era during college. I loved Laughing. So those would be the two that I'm sure there were more, but those are the ones I remember.
Those are two. And what about today, your favorite TV show?
For some reason, I have no idea. I love the X Factor,
Yeah.
and American Idol. In fact, I DVR.
So you like that reality stuff?
Like, I don't watch the Housewife one because that just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
But in terms of the talent,
yeah.
And I DVR it, and I don't watch it while it's going on because I can't stand the commercials. So I will DVR it and then fast forward and see the whole show probably in 40 minutes, where it's like an hour or 2 hour show. But I don't know if it's the competition.
I've never watched any of those shows.
For some reason.
I reached a point where I'd never watched a reality show, and I said, well, geez, I'm going to keep this record perfect.
You watch sports, that's reality.
Yeah, there you go. So the X Factor, how does now, I mean, you got that guy Simon Cowell in there, and
Yes.
you got Errol Smith doing his old show.
That's right.
They both seem to have a pretty good audience.
They're very similar.
And they don't compete, right? Is that a correct
No, they're on
statement?
a different. X Factor, the season is finished before American
So they're
Idol.
smart.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. They got
They
two.
catch you at both ends.
Yeah, they got a good thing going on. Favorite movie ever?
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Really?
My
Huh?
favorite, yeah, Gregory Peck.
And the last movie that you've seen at
The
the
Help.
theater?
Oh, I can't remember the last time I went to a theater,
Really?
to be honest with you.
And you got one next door.
I know, but I never go.
So
Not when you get the dollar videos, but The Help is the last one I got.
And what's that about?
It's a chick flick. I'm not sure if you'd like it. It really takes place, I want to say, in the 50s, and this girl goes into the South and learns about the black community and the housekeepers and how they're treated, and they talk about the help, and she basically writes a book about it. And the whole story is about how she gets that information to be able to write a book.
Okay, now you were always one step ahead of me during this whole interview, so I'm not sure if we actually covered. What was your first job?
First job was at Cambridge City Hospital as a nurse when I graduated. Yeah.
Okay, and we know your current job. You're running the Massachusetts school system.
Please no.
But no, you're diverse. You're involved in the curriculum. Well, not involved. You help set the curriculum at Greater Lowell Regional Tech. Favorite musical artist growing up?
The Beatles, of course.
You can't get better than that.
I mean, my high school was all the Beatles in that whole era. You know?
Yeah. Talk about staying power, huh? Even now, like on ODS, every Wednesday's Beatles
Oh, I have
Wednesday.
on my iPod, I have all the Beatles and all the singers at that point.
How about now?
I like James Taylor,
Yeah.
Toby Keith, and depends on what mood I'm in.
And the Beatles.
And the Beatles.
Because they haven't gone anywhere.
And the Beatles. Oh, I used to love Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite, well, we said sports wasn't your thing, but did you have any athlete that kind of interested you, that you thought was kind of neat growing up?
Well, what was kind of neat is my father's brother was the head usher at the Boston Garden.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Mo Harrington. If anybody works there, he'd know Mo Harrington.
Yeah.
In fact, he happened to be my godfather. So there were times, like at the Escapades, he'd get me a good seat kind of thing. But my father used to go to all the Bruins games. I grew up hearing about Bobby Orr.
Yeah.
Went to the Celtics, Larry Bird.
Yeah.
So even though I wasn't really involved with watching them,
Right.
you would hear the stories from my father talking about the hockey game they saw and what fight they had, Bobby Orr and Bobby Orr,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
And so keeping that in mind, then we'll say we'll ask now who's Phil's favorite athlete?
Exactly. That would be more like it.
Favorite book?
Well, it's funny. To Kill a Mockingbird was one of my favorite books.
Oh, you can do
growing up.
that. Tom Mahon picked The
really
Old Man
did.
of the Sea for both of his.
But you know what I also loved was McCullough's John Adams. First of all, he's a fantastic writer.
Yeah.
But I just loved that book.
And the last book you read?
Killing Lincoln.
Oh, really? So you like the
Bill
historical?
O'Reilly. A little bit both. I mean, I do the chick stuff too. A Woman
Yeah.
of Substance, Nora. Right. Depends on what mood I'm in.
Yeah. Okay. Now we've gotten to know the growing up. We've gotten to kind of get a feel for what you're about, and now we could talk a little bit about the future, your so-called bucket list, or the goals that you would like to accomplish in the next 10 to 15 years.
Well, retirement is one within 10 or 15 years for sure. I'd like to do some traveling. We've been to Ireland. I'd like to go back. That was really cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to go to Alaska and probably Australia. Those are really the only three. Although I'd like to do some traveling in the United States too. So if anything, traveling
Travel would
would be
be
one
on
of
your
those.
list.
And of course, grandchildren.
Yeah.
You know, that you become more active as time goes by and as
Yeah.
they become involved with things. Yeah. And you have more time.
Right.
then you'd like to be able to get involved with that too.
Could you see another Disney trip with the grandkids?
Well, I brought my kids to Disney.
Right.
And they've actually, Braden's already been to Disney with his other set of grandparents. But yeah, at some point in the future, it would be cool.
And again, it's good because you don't have to stay on top of them the whole time.
You don't have to run after them. I couldn't keep up with them
Exactly.
anyway.
Where do you see yourself retiring?
I'll be here. I've been here 40 years. This is my home.
So, yeah.
You know, friends, a lot of family still here. So I'll stay.
All right. Well, let's move forward a few years or a lot of years. And the Fat Lady sings. It's all over. Okay. The people, your friends and family, are standing around at the good old Irish wake.
With the drink?
Oh, absolutely. How would you like to
Not
be?
anymore.
How would you like to be remembered?
Well, it's funny, when my father passed away, I did a eulogy for him. And one of the things that I said is, and he was 86 years old, and he had had a good life. He had not been sick for a long time. And one of the comments I made that hopefully they'll be said about me is that when you think of me, you'll smile. You'll have good memories of me and think well of me and laugh at some of the things we've shared together. So I would like to think that someone says that about me.
Wow. It's every time I ask the question, the answers are always just great. You know, it's when people know the answer to. They really know how they like to be remembered when it's all said and done, and a smile is a heck of a way to be remembered.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you, I feel ignorant of how little I knew about you before you were on the show, because I know a lot about you now. And I want to thank you very, very much. And for people, April 10th, your name will be on the ballot again for Town Council, and good luck to you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.